Hello? Hi, Pat. Sure, as we discussed earlier. Now, when you say Tea Party member, I see the Tea Party as all the Americans, and I think I've distinguished myself as one of those who has tried to come to the aid of their country in this time. As far as formal organizations, I'm going to fill out a questionnaire this Friday for the Tea Party Patriot organization. In the last election, I did sign a contract from America, and I am concerned with, as I say, I have my own specific proposals to cut federal spending and return the power to the states. So I don't actually look to the Tea Party for those ideas, although I listen to them. Now, as far as the key issues of 2012, I would look at job creation, growing the economy, holding down the deficit or cutting the deficit, and foreign policy was just raised today by Romney, and that's, of course, an important area. Now, when I say job creation and creating jobs, I include the huge problem of homelessness. So before growing jobs, we have already huge unemployed, have huge homelessness. So this needs to be a top issue of the campaign, to provide shelter and adequate food for Americans out of work and out of luck, including families that are disintegrated through divorce and family breakdown. And I have a plan that will create a program similar to the emergency unemployment compensation, and also similar to a plan called, or an act of Congress actually, that includes a program called the Homelessness Emergency Assistance and Rapid Transition to Housing, or the HARTH Act. And that act was called the McKinney-Vento program. It was named in part after Bruce Vento, who was the 4th District Representative before Betty McCollum came into office. I'm sure you remember him. And what I think we need to do is provide emergency shelter assistance to qualified homeless people on a temporary basis because of the unemployment situation and because of the foreclosures and bankruptcies that have been swelling up, because of the spectacular failure of our federal homeownership efforts in 2008. And this would allow the states to provide for grants to provide shelter to those who lack shelter by paying homeowners a kind of rent for that person to live there if they met certain qualifications. Now, in addition, to grow the economy, I think for both job creation and economic development, the free market system is the strongest engine, because it's based on our liberty and therefore it's directly based on the Constitution. Now, if you look at England, there's no written constitution. There's been no attempt to secure the specific rights that we wrested away originally from the English government and have enshrined in our constitution. The central is the right of private property, although in the Constitution it's also specified liberty rights specifically, which include the right to enter into contracts, and these together give a strong legal basis for business development and job creation, which has lifted us to a high quality of life and created that middle class, which is, after all, the pride of our system of government. Now, we don't favor the middle class because they vote more. We want to bring many of those Americans from all over the world and who have risen up from slavery, up from war, as the Chicanos and Indians have, and also the Asian immigrants, as well as the Europeans who have flowed to this nation, up into that middle class and to move them to be creators of jobs and businesses, as I believe Mitt Romney articulated very clearly in his presidential debate October 3rd. And so we need a tax policy that grows jobs. Well, if you look at Obama's arguments for tax increases on the rich, which are really the same old ideas of Walter Mondale and the 1984 campaign against Ronald Reagan, these are based on equity or fairness, but not on job creation or business development. And I see the Democrats as being devoid of ideas to grow the economy, and that's dangerous for America. Now, as far as holding down the deficit, the fiscal cliff faces us right off. Betty has contributed to it mightily, Betty McCollum, because rather than act in 2009, while Nancy Pelosi placed her on the Budget and Appropriations Committees on the House, she proclaimed that the budget is just a piece of paper, totally non-binding. She said appropriations was basically all that mattered. And that appeared to cut her heavy responsibilities in half because it freed her to spend more time working on social issues. But we're paying for it now. Betty McCollum thinks the Budget Control Act was a budget passed by the Democratic-controlled Senate, but it's not. It's a finger in the dike. We need to get serious immediately about budget priorities, and I would advance what I call the Take America Forward Act, which would stop the growth in the federal deficit by transitioning power and resources back to the federal states. Mitt Romney and some other Republican candidates have pushed for eliminating federal departments and agencies, and right now Romney is advancing a plan to promote local control and innovation. The important issue for me is this the kind of permanent reversal of federal control that is going to establish principles to shrink the federal role over the long term. Now, of course, the people of Minnesota who currently depend on the federal governments would then have to get involved at the state level to address the same kind of issues. So, for instance, instead of waiting for the Department of Education to tell us what to do, we would get involved directly, spend that money, and build our own educational process, more with like the manual controls. And this would be true with a lot of different areas. They'll do a lot better also if they promote private enterprise in Minnesota than government solutions, and those private enterprises will have to be based on real work and productivity if we want to be competitive globally, because that's a growing challenge. And the programs need to be designed to build families, not to destroy or prevent families as currently Democrats are doing. Because today the Mitt Romney addressed VMI, and I looked over his remarks briefly, and I didn't see anything coming back from Obama yet, but I agree with the direction and substance of Mitt Romney's address. I don't think the Obama campaign is serious about foreign policy. For instance, in their pre-butts, they judged foreign policy by Romney's real concerns about security that he shared about the Olympics. Now, on the other hand, Obama and Clinton's foreign policy has been the Arab Spring, basically. And I feel that that was ill-advised because it consisted basically of students returning to the Middle East in the middle of a global downturn, getting on social media and taking to the streets. Unfortunately, it was exploited by organized Muslim organizations to take power through the Middle East, throughout the Middle East. Now, a better program that I believe projects American values is to promote democratic elections and stick with them. Taking Egypt as an example, Mubarak was winning elections, and the Muslim Brotherhood wasn't allowed to run because they were a religious-based party, and that was because they had assassinated two previous presidents, Sadat and Nasser. Now, Clinton and Obama should have understood this, but instead, I feel they destabilized a dangerous region. And instability is not leadership, and I would work with Romney to create a stable leadership that would bring the light of democracy to the region. But what's really at stake in this election are two things: the role of Congress and the needed national leadership. And we have a so-called Budget Control Act, which is not a budget, but which purports to cut defense $500 billion over 10 years. Defense is a central purpose of the central government. These other programs which I've discussed, which Romney would cut or transition, are not a central purpose of the federal government, but might be considered under the General Welfare Clause of the federal Constitution. But that is shared with the states, and that is a central purpose under the police or policy powers of the states. The states can do the best job in these areas, especially with the kind of enhanced public participation which is possible in the age of higher education and the internet. But what you have now is the people who can't get it done at the local level going up to Washington and actually challenging the whole social or constitutional order, because they're pitting these local issues against the national responsibilities of the government. And that is also true when somebody like Hillary Clinton, while spreading chaos throughout the world, has her ultimate goal to lift women over men in every country. Now, this is a domestic issue which she's seeking to accomplish through American military and diplomatic leadership in the world, which already has a full plate. So this is overstepping the appropriate role of the government and the state government, and mixing up the constitutional order so it can't function. And this is unacceptable and dangerous. So those are my reasons for seeking to restore the proper role of the various parts of our government.